There we go. So I thought this was going to take 2 days. I don't think it's going to take 2 days, but I'll be talking about chapter 17 on Thursday, which is methods of persuasion. This is just, speaking to persuade. What is it? How do we do it? That sort of thing. So we'll start by defining what is persuasion. What does it mean to be persuasive? Because it's different than coercing people. And I'll tell you what coercion is. There are different types of persuasive speeches. There's questions of fact, like, is this true? Should you believe whether or not this is true? Should we value something like elephant poaching or anything like that? And then a policy. Should we believe that this is an okay policy? Is this, fair? Is this just? That sort of thing. Policy issues. And then we have different ways of organizing your persuasive speeches. There are 4 that I'll talk about. One is problem solution. Here's a problem, here's a solution. Pretty simple stuff. You can also do a problem cause solution, saying, well, this is the problem, but what caused this problem? And then how do we solve it? Comparative advantage. It could be that there's a problem and then there's multiple ways to fix that problem. And we'll talk about that in a little while. There's Monroe's motivated sequence, which is probably the most exciting one you can do. It's a 5-step sequence that I'll go over in depth that basically talks about how you can persuade somebody to do something, or even yourself for that matter. And then I'll tell you what days you'll be giving your persuasive speeches in about a month. It's the last week of the semester. So, any questions about anything before we go forward? I don't know, because you never know. In the next class. So, your book didn't say this word ethically, but I think that is a very important word when talking about persuasion. There's a feminist theory out there called invitational rhetoric. And that posits that you're not trying to outright change somebody's mind, you're just trying to bring a new perspective, right? Because when we think about persuasion, we usually think of it as change. And it's right there, changing people's beliefs or actions. But I want you to try to think more broadly about it, because it doesn't have to be about changing someone's mind. It could be, here's another way of thinking of things that I invite you to consider, not completely terminate how you were doing things. This is how we're doing things now. There could be more than one way. And I also added this, without threats or harms to threats, because that is coercion. What did that scammer tell me on the phone? He said, and I quote, "Do you think your bank is going to help you?" He even said, "It's bullshit," So that's how I knew I was, dealing with something there. So that's what persuasion is. I just want you to understand the ethical part of it, that you're not coercing people. You're not trying to scare people, Like, who remembers their driving ed classes? Anybody? Where they show people getting in accidents and stuff? Yeah, that's coercion, trying to convince you, hey, be a safe driver because you could kill somebody, Or don't do drinking and driving because you could kill somebody, that sort of thing. That's not really ethical. Okay. There are ethical goals in mind. Number 1 is you want to present the information to them as honestly as possible. You're not trying to manipulate people. And then we'll talk about ethical methods next chapter. But ethics, just something to consider. And here's another thing you want to think about. Your audience members are very varied, right? They have different beliefs, different, mentalities about things, what have you. Some people are going to be strongly opposed to certain things, and other people are going to be strongly in favor of certain things. If you know somebody is going to be opposed to what you're proposing, don't ask them for a big change, right? You can't ask them, hey, I want you to donate a kidney. That's a huge thing to consider. Unless you're already a blood donor, unless you're already, on your driver's license, it says, are you an organ donor? That means when you die, can they scoop out your organs and give them to people, Some people don't believe in that. I believe in that because I'm dead. What do I care, Why can't somebody use my kidneys or my heart or my brain or my liver, Unless I've already ruined it, but I don't think so. So you might also find people kind of in the middle, I've never donated blood before. I might consider it. But if somebody's like, no, I'm petrified of needles, I will pass out, they're probably not going to believe your speech. I'm a blood donor. I've donated 3 gallons of blood in my lifetime. I want to get to 10. That's my goal, But they even sent me a letter one time that says I've saved 40, 50 people. I don't know how true that is, but people need blood. And why do I donate blood so profusely? Because my mom was a nurse, and she would always talk about how much blood somebody can lose in a car accident. Turns out it's a lot. So, mental dialogue is this give and take between the speaker and the listener. The listeners listening to your speech, they're beginning an ongoing process in their brain of, should I believe what this person is saying? You know, they're going to be going through their own mental gymnastics in their head, trying to figure out, should I believe this? You know, and it's between the speaker too. You know, they're trying to figure out what's the best way that I can persuade people to be on board with what I'm saying. And then we have target audiences. If you're going into business, very important you know what your target audience is. You can't appeal to everybody. That's just not possible, right? So who do you want to persuade the most? Is it college students? If you were talking to old people, are you trying to convince them about retirement? Unless they're already retired, that might not work, you know? But you have to think, who am I trying to persuade here, right? If you want people to be organ donors, probably best to talk to people who aren't organ donors, because if you're already an organ donor, you're just reaffirming what people already know. So here are the 3 speeches that we're going to go over. Not how you can arrange these speeches, just the questions therein. Fact, value, policy. Let's begin by talking about questions of fact. Is this true or false? You know, did this thing happen? Is this thing true? Basically is what your speech is asking, okay? Let me give you an example. The specific purpose of a question of fact speech might be, an earthquake of 9.0 on the Richter scale or above will hit California in the next 10 years. It's a fact. This is going to happen, right? But if we wanted to be a little bit more specific than our specific purpose, we could say, there are 3 good reasons to believe that an earthquake will hit California in the next 10 years. And then we go into the main points of that speech, which would be, we're long overdue for an earthquake in California, you know? Geological signs indicate it may happen soon. You know, you start to feel tremors. You start to have these little warning signs. And then finally, experts agree that an earthquake could strike any day. So you would rely on testimony from other people to say, this doctor from the Geological Institute says it's likely to happen, you know? It's almost like, since we live in Ohio, Kentucky, I live in Ohio, y'all probably don't, to say that, or a tornado, just replace earthquake with tornado. And I think that we're a lot more keen to believe that, you know, because we get those scares all the time. Moving on, the question of value. Is this worth considering? Is this right? This idea, this action, you know? Give you an example. Elephant trophy hunting is legally and morally wrong, you know? It violates international accords and our duty to treat animals humanely. One thing I will say about persuasive speaking is this. If you want a good persuasive speech, it can't be something so obvious like, here's why you should quit smoking. There's no reason to smoke cigarette. There's no actual reason, right? You could be like, oh, well, it's a stress reducer, right? But that's a flimsy line of logic because there's other ways of reducing stress. Breathing, sports, exercise, you know, you can't persuade people to smoke. At least you shouldn't. So that's why I want you to try to think of something that there has to be some type of counter argument to your speech. It can't be something so simple as, you know, here's why you should do something that's plainly, here's why you shouldn't speed on the highway. You know, you can't really, because it feels good. That's not a good counter argument, you know, and it won't be a good speech. So what are the main points for elephant trophy hunting? It violates international accords on species conservation, and it violates what moral philosopher Immanuel Kant says is our duty to treat animals humanely. That's a question of value, okay? Something you should consider in your speeches of, you know, don't think too hard about it. Like, is this fact, is this value? I'm not going to test you on it and say, well, we can't have this many fact, this many values, excuse me, this many policies. Just something to consider. Should we do something? That's what a question of policy speech is asking. Do we do something? Do we not do something? What do we do? Here's an example. I thought I had an example, but I do not. Oh, there's different types of policies. That's why. Duh. So, is this policy desirable? And are we encouraging action to support policy? No, we're not. We're just trying to get people to passively agree to something. Yes, we should be doing something about it. That's what passive agreement is. We should have stricter privacy standards on companies that offer personal genetic testing. You're just asking them to agree with you. You're not asking them to do anything, okay? That's where immediate action comes in. If you have a question of policy, immediate action, it's here's why you should be doing something, not why you should believe something, but why you should do it. To donate to the Wounded Warrior Project, I'm no longer asking you to believe, I'm asking you to do. Like so. There's 3 different policy issues to consider. Is there a need for this policy? Do we have a plan for this policy? And is it practical? If you think about the Cincinnati tram, have anybody seen that? The little electrical tram that goes around the city? That wasn't always there. It was there back in the day until oil and gas companies decided, you know what, we're going to monopolize buses. Stinky, polluty buses, you know? So they got rid of it. There's even a subway system for Cincinnati. Did y'all know that? Yeah. I think they can even like offer tours to people if that's something you're interested in. If Aiden were here, I'd reference the catacomb speeches because, you know, underground catacombs, that whole thing. But if you're trying to convince people to adopt solar power, do they need solar power? You know, is there an effective plan? How expensive is it? That sort of thing. And is it practical? Clean energy is very practical because we're not relying on polluting the environment anymore. But if it's not cheap, if it's too expensive, then it's not really going to be practical. So the need, do we really need to change? What is your plan to solve it? Do you have more than one plan? It could be that there's 2 ways of solving a problem. Will the plan solve the problem, or will it just create new problems? That sort of thing. Okay. Here are the 4 different ways to organize your speeches. We'll begin by talking about a problem solution. Very simple. There is a problem. That could be your first main point in your speech. Your second main point is your solution to the problem. Pretty simple, you know? There's a lot of homeless people. What do we do about it? You know, what's one solution to the problem? What's another solution to the problem? Here's an example. The US Congress should pass legislation that will reduce lead levels in the nation's water supply. You know? Fact, policy, or value? Which do y'all think this is? Is it something like, is this true or not? That's a fact. Is this something we should value, or is this a policy? Yeah, it's a policy. Like, we think that Congress should do something. The government should do something. That's what makes this a policy speech. Lead in the water is a serious problem, and we should reduce lead levels in our water. Nobody's advocating for lead in their water, right? So that is a problem solution example. There's too many scammers out there. The government should do something, you know? The main points in this speech could be, here's why lead in our water supply is a problem. It could lead to birth defects. It could lead to cancer, that sort of thing. And it requires government action. Okay, so here's the problem. Here's the solution. All right, moving on to problem, cause, solution. It's just adding an additional step that what is the cause is, right? It could be that there isn't just one thing that caused this problem, okay? And then what is the solution to that problem? If you want to talk about childhood obesity, for example, it could be that there's more than one problem. There's more than one, or not more than one problem, that is the problem. There's more than one cause to the problem. It could be diet, but did you know in Mexico, in the state of Oaxaca, it's spelled with an O, crazy enough, they banned the sale of sugary foods and drinks. Banned. You want to go in and get a Snickers? Too bad. It just doesn't exist anymore. But that's in that one particular city. And why did they ban that? Because childhood obesity was so bad. It was endemic. And that was their solution to the problem. Because they thought it's just too accessible. This is what caused this problem. So we need to deal with childhood obesity. I know. Great segue, right? It's a serious problem that can be controlled by changes in diet and exercise. So the main points is, here's a problem. And why is it a problem? Because anybody can say childhood obesity is a problem, but I don't believe you. How can you support your claim of that it is a serious problem? There are two major causes of the increase in childhood obesity. That is where you'd indicate what your causes are in main point number 2. You would say there are two major causes, boom and boom. Those are the two major causes. Then you move on to the solution. You know, it could be that kids are just having a poor diet. They're not getting enough exercise. My solution is diet, exercise. That's a problem cause solution. Comparative advantage. One solution might be better than the other solution, okay? So in this, you would sort of lay out the problem, and then you'd say, here's one solution, but here's another solution, and here's why we can sort of compare them to each other, okay? An example would be, our city should build a rapid bus system instead of a new highway, because new highways are just more cars, more pollution, that sort of thing. It'll be cheaper and more effective than a new highway. So the solution is just one solution, but it's saying, here's one reason why we should do it, it's cheaper, and here's another reason, it's more effective. It'll save $1 million. That could be your first main point. That's what makes it cheaper, as opposed to relying on, cars, and building the actual highway. And it will reduce traffic congestion, so it's going to save people time. They can get home from work faster, that sort of thing. That's a comparative advantage main speech. Now, here's Monroe's motivated sequence. I did this when I was in my public speaking class. This is what I did. 5-step process. Step number 1, gain their attention. You already have to do that in your speeches, in your introduction, right? How do I gain your attention so you can listen to me for the next 7 minutes? Somebody's standing on a street corner. They're holding a cardboard sign, hungry, cold, homeless. That's a way you can capture their attention, really bring them in, you know? You could do that. Make a cardboard sign, bring it in. Be like, imagine that I was standing on the street corner holding this sign, you know? That sort of thing. Why does this need to change? Is there a reason that change needs to happen? Okay? You're trying to show them that there is a need. You need to do something about this. Satisfaction, that is your solution to the problem. Okay? You can say, it could be that there's just not one way to fix homelessness, but there are multiple things you can do. And it doesn't have to be done on a policy scale, it can be individual. But then big change isn't really happening. So you get their attention, you establish that there's a need to be fixed or changed, give them a solution, and then imagination, visualize what that solution would look like and the benefits that it would give you. And then finally, after you've done all that, you say, now you can do something. You take action, you make a change. Be the man in the mirror, like Michael Jackson said. It all starts with you. You're urging them to do something. It's not just, here's why you should believe something, and here's why you can visualize that, but do something. So, did you know that you have 10 pints of blood in your body? Or some type of interesting fact about about blood donation, or statistically, here's how much blood somebody can lose in a car accident on average. Here's how many blood donations need to happen every single day in the United States. That sort of thing. Why do we need to change? Because there's not enough blood. You know, there's just a shortage of blood. And here's the thing about blood types. I'm going to get all sciencey on you for a minute. So, who can tell me a blood type? A. What's another one? AB. A, B, O, and there's one more. AB, that's right. So, to get all sciencey on you. O, scandalous. Who can tell me why O blood is important? Anybody?
It's the rarest.
It's the rarest?
Universe.
That would be AB. Yes, it's the universal donor. Somebody with O-type blood, which is what I have, can give blood to all these people. The AB type, however, can only receive blood from an O type, and that's it. Or an AB type. I can't remember specifically, but A types can only get A blood. If you try to give B blood to an A type person, their body will reject it, just like a disease. Like their white blood cells will start attacking the blood, okay? But AB, that's what it is. They're the universal recipient. They can actually get blood from O, B, and AB, right? So you can say that there's a need for change because it could be there's just not a lot of O types and we need more blood, you know? Or it could be that, you know, you're a recipient and you can get all these different types of blood. So why is there a need? Why should we do something? The solution is go donate blood, you know, because you can do it every 8 weeks. Or if you're tall enough and you weigh enough, you can do it every 16 weeks because you can donate a double unit, twice as much blood. So it's actually pretty crazy. They hook you up to an aphoresis machine, which cycles your blood through the machine and then puts it back in your body. It like takes something out of your blood. Again, I'm not a science major. I'm a communication major. But how can this benefit you? You might get a letter in the mail saying, hey, you saved somebody's life. That feels pretty good, right? To know that you made a difference in the world, not that your blood's just sitting in a refrigerator in a closet. Somebody used it. Something happened, you know? And then action. You know, if you can do it every 8 weeks, do it. And then you don't have to do it for 8 more weeks. Your body will replenish. And you could even say, like in the satisfaction, or even in the visualization, what benefits does your body get by kind of recycling its blood? You know, I'm sure it's not good for your body to keep the same amount of blood in your system all the time. But if you get rid of some of it, your body has to generate more. And again, I don't know the science of it, but you could know the science of it if that was a topic for your speech. But let me give you an example that's not about blood donation. Taking notes by hand instead of on a computer. Why should you do it? Okay. Central idea being you can learn more and you can get better grades. What better motivator is there than that? You know, you'll do better in class. Attention. Most of us use a computer to take notes. That's a given, or our phones or whatever. So that's how you can sort of capture their attention. Like you already take notes as it is. But this can actually reduce your learning. Anybody have any idea why? Of why like taking notes on the computer is actually not a good idea. Exactly. You can get distracted because I guarantee you there is not just the ability to take notes on your computer, right? You can do online shopping. You can be looking at Facebook. You can be playing video games. Or since you use your computer for things besides school, your brain just isn't used to the idea of taking notes on a computer. You're used to doing leisurely things on it or something like that. You know, your mind has just been tricked like that. But when you write stuff out, you don't always do it that way, unless you're an artist like Lacey. So, satisfaction. You can avoid these problems of distracting yourself and the people around you. When I was an undergrad, I absolutely despised people taking notes on the computer because they weren't taking notes on the computer. They were just dicking around. They were just doing Amazon shopping and stuff, you know, like, and that was incredibly distracting for me because I'm here trying to learn, getting an education, improving my life. And what are y'all doing? Paying thousands of dollars to just do what you could have done at home. So I didn't get it. But taking notes by hand, you avoid that problem of distracting yourself. And it will improve your learning and your grades. You just remember more because if you just type what I'm saying, you don't really internalize it. You're just sort of putting it down so you can look at it later. But when you have to physically write something out, your brain is now adjusting to what your hand is doing. It's no longer just, let me just put it on the screen, okay? So that's how you can visualize that goal. And then leave your laptop at home. That's the action you can convince people to take, you know? Bring a pen and paper instead of that whole shenanigan, okay? So it's a 5-step sequence. So your main points could be each one of those 5, you know? In this speech, I'm going to talk about how taking notes by hand can help improve your learning and your grades. Or it could be broken out however you want that way too. You can sort of combine the first 2 into one main point, saying like, here's the attention step, here's the need step, and then moving on to main point number 2, the solution. And then main point number 3 could be the visualization and action. Or you can make all 5 on each individual main point. It's up to you. But that is all for the lecture today. Any questions before I go over who is giving speeches on what days? Okay. I will make an announcement for this on Canvas, but here's just so you know right now. Again, this is totally random. I didn't pick people to go on certain days. Day number 1, the 23rd of April, we got Giselle, Aiden, Jaylee, Stephanie, Emily Taylor, Lacey, and Maddie. I don't know, Lacey. Then day number 2, Thursday, April 25th, we got Haley, Lily, Jazz, Abby, Armin, Emily Ashcraft, and Mike. Okay? And again, I will make an announcement so that y'all know, and it's not just here's the one time you can see it, but let me actually go over the speech assignment itself, because that's important. And this is the culmination of all your public speaking abilities. So this is expected to be the longest, the best one. I'm asking the most from you here. You can find this information in module number 14. It's the second to last module. So it has to be 7 to 10 minutes. Some of you already got to the 7-minute mark in your informative speeches, which was how long they were supposed to be, right? So 7 to 10, sorry, not 7 to 9. Take your time with this one, you know, because we do have time. There's an hour and 45 minutes or an hour and a half in this class. No, hour and a half. Am I doing that right? 9:30? Hour 15. Thank you, Matt. Again, math's not my strong suit. So what is the point of this speech? You're trying to persuade people on a question of fact, value, or policy. And you have to take a position on this speech, not like the last one where it was just, I'm going to tell you about this thing. You are putting yourself into the speech by saying, I believe in this. Or you can be like, I don't believe in elephant trophy hunting, which is why I'm saying we shouldn't value it. That sort of thing. But yeah, 4 sources. So twice as many as your last speech. And some of you did have 4 sources for your speech this time, which is great. But that is also a way for you to get to that 7 to 10 minute mark. By being like, this source comes from, or this information comes from this source. So you can really lengthen it out that way. And you also need a visual aid. You can upload it to Canvas. You can email it to me like you already have. Use a PowerPoint, use a Prezi, whatever. Just practice with it, right? Practice giving your speech as you normally would while referencing your visual aids, you know? You don't have to, but you can. Like if you're worried like there's not enough information here to really have something, then you can say, well, here's what the opposing side says. And that will make for a rigorous, more well-researched speech too, because you're not just speaking in a vacuum, you know? Like if you take blood donation, for example, it's like, well, some people will pass out if they see a needle, and that's valid. You know, you can't really argue against that. But you can say, like, there are other ways of donating blood. I don't know. Be creative. I'll also look at your outline ahead of time if you want, about a week ahead before the actual speech is given. So you can give me that opportunity. I'll give you as much feedback as I possibly can. You can even send me your visual aid if you're worried about, like, well, is this a good graph? What other stuff could I put in here? That sort of thing. Any questions about this upcoming speech, about time, about sources, about visual aids, any of that? Okay. We'll be talking about chapter 17 on Thursday. So read the chapter, do the homework, that sort of thing. And don't get scammed. Yes. Rubric. Good question. Let me pull up the rubric real quick. Oh, yes, I do. I also have your rubrics for your informational speeches. But as you can see here, here's the rubric for you. You can look at it on your own time because, you know, you're all getting out of here. But let me hand out your feedback.